Now, I give the floor to Mr. Gennaro Migliore, Onorevole Migliore, the chair of the PAM, Special Parliamentary Assembly Committee on Countering Terrorism, and a member of the Italian Chamber of Deputies. Onorevole Migliore, caro Gennaro, la parola a te.
Grazie Roberto, thanks everyone. And first of all, I want to bring the greetings from the president of PA-PAM, Karim Darwish. And ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure and an honor for me to open this virtual parliamentary web talk on counterterrorism administered by the COVID pandemic. In my capacity as the chair of the Special Committee on Counterterrorism of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean, I am very happy of the decision taken with the Parliamentary Assembly of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe and with the United Nations Office on Counterterrorism to conduct such an important debate together. On behalf of the three organizations, I wish to welcome you all, and I'm also glad to see such a strong turnout as together we represent 65 parliaments of countries with interrelated security challenges, ranging from Vancouver to Vladivostok and to the Arabian Peninsula. And also I want to thanks, of course, the presence of Mr. Lopakta, that is the president of the HLAG of IPU for counterterrorism. Dear colleagues, in recent months, our attention focused on the many implications of COVID-19. Within this unprecedented new reality, remaining vigilant on the evolving threat of terrorism has been a challenge for all of us. Terrorist groups have seized the opportunity presented by the pandemic to strengthen their radical propaganda, and in recent months, significant terrorist activity has been reported in different regions of the world. If a state presenting territorial terrorist group, for example, in Nigeria, Boko Haram, and in this country formulates some inadequate health policies against COVID, this reinforces community support for that group. That's the risk that we all are facing. This happens because in the case of some terrorist groups that have a base inside territorial on the model of ISIL, it's important to take in account as we have the opportunity to discuss in previous meetings that are really in the ground this kind of organization. In Iraq, after months of restructuring following the death of its leader, ISIL is mounting a resurgence with a sharp increase in attacks since last March, taking advantage of the pandemic, the domestic political crisis, and the US troops downsizing ahead of a schedule due to the COVID-19. In northeast Syria, thousands of ISIL fighters, including many foreigners, in recent months have organized 2 prison riots in attempts of a mass jailbreak, recalling us that their detention by non-state actors is not a sustainable solution and represent a real danger to our region. Many countries are still reluctant to repatriate not only ISIL terrorist fighters, but also their women and children, including orphans, held in extremely poor conditions in detention camps, often under the management of ISIL female police. Without proper prosecution, rehabilitation, and de-radicalization strategies, these people are likely to represent soon a danger of all our countries. PAM has already been able to achieve a political consensus on the issue of our delegates unanimously endorsed a proposal to establish a UN-led mission of inquiry to Syria to assist with this process, proposal that was received with great interest by the UN Security Council. The issue of ISIL terrorist prisoners is complex, as we are also facing challenges here in Europe. We have seen a pattern of terrorists turning back to violence after being released from prisons and serving their sentences. Given the fact that thousands of terrorist prisoners will be due for release in the near future, we must examine the effectiveness of the de-radicalization programs, post-prison monitoring, and halting the automatic release of prisoners without a true clearance. I know that our colleagues in the UK had to pass an emergency legislation in this regard earlier this year. This month, a man was arrested in Spain with the support of Europol for transferring money between several European and Arab countries via the Awala money transfer system to finance the return of foreign terrorist fighters from Syria to Europe. This goes to highlight that terrorists are not dormant and are using new technologies for terrorist purposes and are active across borders. To effectively track, capture, and prosecute terrorists, there is an absolute need for close cooperation between the relevant agencies of our countries. To facilitate such cooperation, our legislation needs to be in harmony and the same standards, not only on terrorism, but also on financial crimes, cybercrime, and on electronic evidence. Dear colleagues, in North Africa, the vulnerability to terrorist attacks remains high. As we have seen several incidents in Tunisia and Egypt, while at the same time the authorities are able to prevent many attacks through their counterterrorism efforts. The situation in Libya is unique and of a grave concern. The increasing involvement of foreign actors and mercenaries in the Libyan conflict, the mass of proliferation of weapons, the large-scale human trafficking and migrant smuggling, and the impact of COVID-19 in the population, coupled to the active ISIL presence on the proximity to the many jihadist actors in Sahel, are all factors contributing to a worsening security scenario. Last but definitely not least, the Sahel area and the Central Africa belt are the most troubling region for terrorist activity today. As we have witnessed an exponential increase in number of attacks and fatalities in recent years, and worse, it could even become the ground zero for another caliphate project. The success of the jihadist movement in the Sahel region is rooted in the exploitation of local tribal conflicts by global jihadist actors and the perception of limited government legitimacy in the eyes of some population. In recent months, there have been also a number of documented atrocities committed by state-controlled force in the region. This is a factor that adds into the growing insecurity. A perceived poor socio-economic response to the pandemic of the part of the authorities will indeed further increase the acceptance of jihadist movements as they progressively work to undermine official rule. As an example, in Mali, a Salafi jihadi group was able to disrupt this year's parliamentary election by kidnapping the candidates. Dear colleagues, despite all the challenges that we face because of COVID-19, it's clear that we must remain vigilant in the face of terrorism threat. And we have a unique platform here today to take stock of this issue, and share legislative practices to highlight the critical role of parliaments and international cooperation in counterterrorism. We have an impressive high-level panel of senior officials from the League of Arab States, of the OSCE, and the security defense sector. I would like to conclude my opening remarks here and invite my colleagues from the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly and the UN Office of Counterterrorism to further welcome you to all this meeting. Thank you for your attention.
Grazie mille, Gennaro. Grazie per le parole. And now the concluding remarks from Gennaro Migliore, onorevole Migliore. Avevo un presidente che si chiamava Migliori.
I remember, and I knew him. First of all, I want to thanks again for the perfect organization, the OSCE, PA, and PAM, and UNOCT, because we are facing this very complicated issue in a very comprehensive way. Everybody has a very strong contribution to our debate, and I hope that it is possible to continue in this way for next months. I can summarize some consideration in this way. After COVID-19, we face old problems in a new era, because after the COVID-19, a lot of things are changing, and also we have to change our attitude to the problem that we know very well, but in this new phase, it's important to manage with other activities and other instruments. For example, the situation also, we are using a web platform to have this web dialogue, but the deepening use of the web from the terrorist organization is now maybe the first problem, not only for the radicalization of people, but also for the networking, also for funding for this organization. And so we have to manage with the new threats that are combined with some failure in national organization, as for example, Mr. Margelletti said in his intervention, and not only him, but other, where the possibility to have a control of areas by the terrorist organization is not only made by violence, but also with a kind of welfare that is in this pandemic situation so important. So we need different answers, and I guess that it's important to discuss in a parliamentary way this kind of response, because of course the first activity is due to the governments, but the parliamentary way is to be able to ease the dialogue and to build a framework, a common framework, a legislative framework that is possible to apply in different countries. In order to this situation, I guess that it's important to focus the regional crisis. We heard a lot about the crisis around the Nagorno-Karabakh region, or for example, for the conflict in Israel and Palestinian region. So we have to remark that fighting against terrorism is not only a single issue activity. Fighting terrorism, it's a comprehensive activity that involved from the education to the repression to the international law. That's why it's so important to have this kind of meetings, because this holistic approach is the only possible to face these dramatic threats for all the countries. Terrorism, I agree with the people that said it, is not only a problem of, or it's present only on the Islamic side. We know everyone that there are terroristic organizations coming from suprematist and far right that attacks Muslim people, for example. And on the other side, we know that the jihadist terrorism, first of all, attacks the Muslim people in their countries. That's why we need this new approach, this new situation. Also for us, using more the internet connection, the sharing opportunity to have a common platform. For that, I imagine that the organization like OSCE and UNOCT are the best for us to have not only information but also coordination. And it's a pleasure for me to have the privilege to conclude this very important web dialogue, because we need this kind of dialogue. And of course, I wait for you in the next meeting. I hope also in presence in Italy, when on 29th of October, we had a meeting, a special meeting organized with the United Nations, in collaboration with the United Nations and IPU on the victim of terrorism. That's why we are facing this new era. After the COVID-19, we had to manage in all ways the possibility to have more strong collaboration. The pandemic shows that we are all under attack of a virus, but in any case, we have to understand that all the global threats are to be faced together. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Onorevole Migliore, for these concluding remarks, which I totally subscribe. I'm convinced that fighting global challenges like the one of terrorism, but also the one of climate change and all the other ones, require global cooperation between international actors. And I think what we did today, and I congratulate all those who participated, we've done exactly that, putting together the assets of the UN, of the OSCE, of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean, not in a competitive fashion, but in a very cooperative fashion, and trying to find the forte, which is in each of these organizations, and to put it together at the service of the constituencies we all represent. So